we clearly saw that there was an underreporting of theft in the years after Prop 47. Prop 47 was the root of the problem. I know you've talked about it on the show. We've talked about it. That happened in 2014, and that was what allowed people to steal up to $950 every day, 10 times a day, and only get a ticket, right? But what happened is, as the years went by, you can see in the data, there was the reporting of crimes started to drop. And when we talked to businesses and retailers about what were they actually doing when a theft crime occurred, they would admit they didn't even bother to call it in anymore. Because what's the point? Nothing's going to happen. And so it's absolutely fair to say that the data, that the publicly available data that was out there showed that theft in many places had not gone up. Now there are exceptions to that. So in the lead up to Prop 36, where things really started to get out of hand, you did start to see places like Los Angeles study very specifically petty theft, and they found a 100% increase in the petty theft, leading up to Prop 36. I can't explain why there was suddenly an increase in the reporting, other than perhaps the fact that businesses knew that there was something on the ballot that might bring a remedy, encourage them to promote.
So they started reporting it.
We all agree on, and I think you referenced this, is that Californians saw it with their own eyes. I mean, people all over the state were seeing the thefts on the news, on social media. If you go into a store in any metropolitan area, you would see product locked up behind glass. It became inconvenient to buy all kinds of products because they were locked up. That's not normal. That's not how California was 10 years ago. And people, I think, ultimately voted yes on Prop 36, in large part because they saw it with their own eyes and they've just had enough. So the data is always a problem in the criminal justice system because it's imperfect. It's imperfect in the reporting, it's imperfect in the collection, it's imperfect in the way that it's reported out by the news media and researchers. That's my experience, almost 30 years in criminal justice.
If you were to give us, and this might be a very hard question, if you were to give us some estimates, how much can we trust that data?
It's a great question. I think that you have to always try and verify the data, the government data, with some other sources. And I know that sounds a little bit vague, but I don't trust the government data. And I'm a member of the government as a prosecutor. And whenever I see the data, I always question everything we just talked about. Is what effect does underreporting have on it? What effect does human error have sometimes on the entry of data? These are real things, not just in California, all over the country. Again, Prop 36 is a great example because there was a huge disconnect between what the official data showed for many years and what people saw with their own eyes. And maybe at the end of the day, the fact that 70% of the people voted for Prop 36 shows you that people chose not to trust the government data, which many on the opposition were waving around studies saying crime was down, theft is down. That wasn't the experience we had, and it wasn't true.
What other crimes in California that people need to pay attention to? Is there anything else that you might think we should pay attention to that we may not be hearing about?
Well, I think we continue to be really plagued by fentanyl and the scourge of fentanyl all over California. Now, since the change in the administration and there's been less fentanyl coming into California, that's a fact. But it's still, what's out there is driving a lot of overdoses and a lot of violence in communities. So that's something I would put at the top of the chart for things that I remain concerned about. And the second thing is human trafficking. I think that continues to be a real problem in California because we have huge immigrant populations that are often victimized, they're taken advantage of. We also have the highest poverty rate in the nation, which is involved, in my opinion, in some of the human trafficking. We just see this issue still going strong in a negative way, all the way up the Interstate 5 and across California, tip to tip.
You mentioned violence with fentanyl. Can you explain that?
The real danger with fentanyl, first of all, is that it's so deadly. I mean, I think this is common knowledge at this point, but the statement, one pill can kill. With fentanyl, it's literally one speck can kill. It's so powerful. They're using it now. The drug dealers, mostly out of Mexico, are using fentanyl in every single drug that they are producing. So somebody thinks they're buying cocaine, it has fentanyl in it, guaranteed. They're buying methamphetamine, it has fentanyl in it, guaranteed. Heroin, everything has fentanyl in it. That's incredibly dangerous, and it's resulting in a lot of people dying. But related to that are the dealers that are selling it. And what we've seen in Los Angeles and San Francisco and a lot of the big metropolitan areas is you have people who are drug dealers selling primarily fentanyl. That's the #1 drug out in the streets right now. Most are here illegally. Most are armed with firearms. And it's a very dangerous profession, obviously. We're seeing that continues to be a driver of both the addiction issue, because there's still dealers all over major cities slinging fentanyl, but it also is connected to much of the violence we see with the increased shootings and felonious assaults, which, again, the data, if you believe the data, felonious assaults went up dramatically in the last few years. We believe that it's tied to the open drug use, the fentanyl, the drug scene.
Are they different, these drug dealers that are doing fentanyl, with the previous drug dealers that we've had in this state? Do you see a difference?
There is a difference. I mean, what we're seeing is the fentanyl dealers that are here now, or the drug dealers are here now, many of them are actually coming in from places like the Central America. They're literally being recruited, trained, and deployed to California to sell drugs. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you still had drug dealers. We still had a lot of people that were being held accountable, but they tended to be more, frankly, local people. And that was my experience. I was a drug prosecutor, a drug and a gang prosecutor for a decade before I became the DA, the elected DA. That was my experience. It's a different crowd now, and many of them are connected with cartels and powerful criminal enterprises.
This administration has designated cartels as terror organizations. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's perfect. I think it's right. They are terrorist organizations, and I'm glad that the administration has designated them so. I mean, especially, the MS-13 and the gang out of Venezuela coming up. If you just spend a few minutes and study the crimes that these gangs are committing, I don't think any reasonable person would disagree. Murder, rape, human trafficking, drug dealing, the stories across our country about families, women in particular, who've been murdered and raped by these gang members. How is that not terrorism?